for those of you in person and those of you that are participating virtually. We'll be monitoring the chat accordingly. And written comments and questions can also be included in the chat as well. And I have team members that are going to be helping me make sure I don't miss anybody. So with that, I'm going to start with introductions. My name is Christina Byrne, and I am the Department Manager of Public Outreach at the Orange County Transportation Authority. And now I'll go through the room and have those that are with us today introduce themselves, and starting with Dan Fu.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dan Fu with the Orange County Transportation Authority, and I'm the project manager for this study effort.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rob Klofsky with HDR, and I'm the project manager on the consultant team.
And I'm George Roscom with HDR. I'm the deputy project manager.
I'm Jason Lee with OCTA. I'm with Rail Capital Programs.
Hi, everyone. This is Leslie Meyerhoff with the City of San Clemente. I'm the Coastal Administrator.
Again, Susan Brodeur, Senior Coastal Engineer, County of Orange, OC Parks.
I'm Makana Nova, Coastal Planning Manager for OC Parks, County of Orange.
Jason Jackson, Public Outreach, Ariano Associates, supporting Christina.
Hi, everyone. Irene Ho, Office Chief of Transportation Planning at Caltrans District 12.
My name is James Campbell. I'm the Operations Officer for the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency, responsible for the oversight of the Pacific Surfliner service.
Good afternoon. I'm Charlie with
Allison Army with OCTA Planning.
All right. I know that we have some attending verbally or virtually today, so I will call on a few individuals one by one. Avi.
Hi, this is Avi Shah. I'm with HDR. I'm the engineering lead for the study.
And Brian. Brian Bauer. All right, Rachel Carr.
Good afternoon, Rachel Carr from Orange County Supervisor Katrina Foley's office.
All right, and we have quite a few folks at OCTA that are attending in conference room 214. So rather than go around the room in there, I'm just going to keep on going. So we have David Berryman.
Yeah, hi, David Berryman, representing the Lausanne agency.
And Eric Banghart.
Eric Banghart with Mont McDonald. I'm the planning lead for the consultant side.
And Justin Fernelli.
Afternoon, Justin Fernelli, Chief of Program Delivery for Metrolink. I will be in the room here shortly.
Thank you. And Jessica. Oh, Jessica Ringel, sorry about that. Elizabeth Lund.
Hi, Liz Lund, Director within Metrolink's Program Delivery Team.
Matt Sinacori.
Yeah, good afternoon. Matt Sinacori, City of Dana Point, Public Works Director. We're one of the key stakeholders in the corridor and manage all sorts of infrastructure, including a quiet zone.
And Hugo.
Good afternoon, Hugo Pineda, County of Orange, OC Public Works, Operations and Maintenance.
Scott Shelley.
Yes, good afternoon. Scott Shelley, Caltrans District 12, Local Development Review, Climate Change, Transit, and Coastal.
And Steve May.
Good afternoon, Steve May, City of San Juan Capistrano, Project Manager.
All right, thank you very much. So with that, we're going to move on. and have Dan go through, or sorry, I'm going to go through the agenda very quickly. Our agenda today includes a history of the study area. We're going to review the project charter, go through goals and objectives, the study schedule and key milestones, discuss some reinforcement areas that we're pursuing, and then I'll be talking a little bit about the study outreach and the goal for the listening sessions, the first of which is here today with the PDT.
Okay, thank you, Christina. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to take a moment and just go over the history of why we're here. So this particular slide has a lot of information. It's really meant to really the takeaway for the particular. Over the last couple of years, we've been monitoring a
Your mic is out.
Good afternoon. This is Dan. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So sorry about that. A bit of challenge with the mic here. So I was just saying that I want to welcome everyone here today. And I want to just take a quick moment and talk about the history, what kind of led up, the genesis that led up to this particular study. So over the last couple of years, there have been a lot of activities starting from the regional all the way to the state and even the federal level regarding rail issues and challenges along the railroad, particularly down here in Orange County and even further south. So some of these efforts have been led by the likes of CalSTA, as well as the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency, and even our neighbors to the south, the folks over at Sandag. So really the takeaway here is that there are just a lot of activities happening, and then we need to monitor and just kind of learn from some of the lessons that these other folks have gone through. I think maybe I'll just kind of pause there and ask the folks in the room if there's any other study or major activities that you believe that we should continue to keep an eye on. And actually, there's also another slide later that has more of the local activity. So maybe I'll just kind of jump to that and then we can kind of pause there for comments or input. So in terms of local activities, starting with the first few items, even going back as far as the fall of 2021, OCTA had experienced some major rail challenges with respect to some of the things that have happened down in San Clemente. And so there have been a number of emergency projects that have been undertaken, led by OCTA in close coordination with Metrolink, who's our rail operator, to address some of the issues. And I actually have a couple of slides to talk a little more about those. And then there are also activities with our partners down at the City of San Clemente, for instance, with the sand replenishment project that the city is partnering with the Army Corps of Engineers that are underway. In fact, that process had already begun at the end of last year. And then the city also led a feasibility study, a nature-based feasibility study, and released the draft concept back in late September of last year. So maybe I'll pause there and look to the folks in the room and kind of get your input on in terms of if there's any other major activities that we should keep an eye on that will help us with this particular study.
Dan, what's happening in the city of San Antonio? We're also seeing a
Thank you for that information, and we'll we'll be in contact with you to get more information on those two efforts. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Just to add on to a couple things that we've been doing at the county regarding our park facilities at Capistrano Beach. We have identified a nature-based coastal resiliency project, and we have applied for FEMA BRIC funds that were we've been identified as receiving those funds. We're just kind of waiting to hear for awards. So there's also been a lot of activities that we've been doing with kind of started with the Capistrano Beach master plan effort. That's currently kind of on hold until we can move forward with this nature-based project. In addition, we've been working with our partners at Doheny State Beach and various efforts with Public Works to just this past fall, summer and fall, implement a opportunistic project where we brought in some sand material that was transported from the Santa Ana River, and that was about 45,000 cubic yards that we've added to that stretch of beach right there.
Few extra efforts I'm going to add to this adventure for the County of Orange. Working right now, the cities of San Clemente and Dana Point are looking to partner with Sandag. Did we mention that already? Okay, and that is their regional beach sand project, and they've done 2 projects already in 2001 and 2012, and this would be the 3rd project that they're embarking on. So, you know, from Dana Point south, where we're looking to participate and benefit from sand placement with that project. Also want to add, we have our South Orange County Coastal Resilience Strategic Plan. It's a mouthful. We've had about 3 stakeholder meetings. I believe OCTA been participating along the way there. We are anticipating a draft release in early 2024. So in the coming months, we will have probably one last stakeholder meeting for that, looking really for collaboration amongst the agencies with that process. So stay tuned. Thank you.
I'm Brunelli with Metrolink. Wouldn't say that we have major initiatives other than the emergency repairs that we've done, but I think as part of our maintenance of way efforts, going through with track inspections, we do place riprap sporadically when we identify that there's been an erosion issue to maintain the track infrastructure and ensure the safe operation of trains. And that's
Hey, thank you very much for your input. So we will certainly get in touch with you all as a follow-up to this meeting to get some more information and see how we can best fold that information into the larger study and make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. So thank you very much for your input. So just the next couple of slides, really the takeaway and what I want to underscore is the importance and the partnership that we on addressing the issues that that had been occurring. So, for example, at milepost 206.8 with the Cypress Shore in the Cypress Shore community area, we've undertaken a track stabilization project to protect the railroad from the inland landslide. And then prior to that, in late 2021, there was a issue on the coastal side with the loss of beach that had led to the integrity of the railroad being compromised. And the resolution, temporary resolution for that was the placement of riprap on the coastal side of the railroad. So again, appreciate the partnership with the city. And then more recently, with the issues or challenges that the city have faced at the Casa Romantica Cultural Gardens and Cultural Center, there was a landslide on that particular property, and Metrolink and OCTA worked closely together with the city to put in a catchment wall to protect the debris from coming down into the railroad. So with that, I'll move on to the project charter. So really, I just wanted to touch on this. We're not quite there yet in terms of drafting and completing the project charter, but ultimately, as part of this particular study, and I'll get into the goals and objectives, as part of this particular study, we're going to have a purpose and need. Why are we here? What do we want to accomplish as part of this study? Ultimately, what do we want to get out of this? And again, I'll touch on that more in a moment. But the project charter is really something we want to put together to make sure everybody hones in on what is the ultimate goal for the onset of this particular study. And that's something that we feel that is really important in terms of all of the participants, whether it's the folks that are part of the PDT today or any future stakeholders that we're going to be engaging. So these are some of the major kind of sections we're contemplating that's part of the project charter. And so stay tuned, and in sometime in the near future, when we do have the purpose and need drafted, we'll share it with this group. And in my mind, this is an accompanying document. So in terms of the goals and objectives, I touched on that earlier. We've had rail service interruptions over the last handful of years that have led to extended rail closures. And this, as you all know, is a major rail corridor that spans multiple counties and many, many hundreds of miles, including the 350-mile Low-Sand Rail Corridor Agency. So what we want to really do is minimize any more surprises, in my mind, I think, to put it in simple terms. And so what we want to do as part of this study is to basically address some of those issues, whether it's on the shorter term or the medium term. And so what we mean by the 10-year is not that we're necessarily, or the 30 years on the midterm, not that we're necessarily going to study the solutions for the next decade or 3 decades, but rather the idea is to come up with solutions such that they can last from a design standpoint for, let's say, a decade, or from a design standpoint for several decades. In the meantime, there's also been talks about a coastal retreat strategy. That's not part of this effort. That is something we acknowledge that needs to be considered and looked at, but it's certainly not part of this strategy. And this particular study, to me, the underlying goal is to protect the railroad in place. What can we do to protect the railroad in place while minimizing any surprises or service disruptions? So the other major takeaway on this particular slide is we're going to need to work with stakeholders across multiple facets, whether it's private HOAs or the city or the county or the Coastal Commission and other regulatory agencies and so forth. So that's going to be a key component of this effort and any ongoing subsequent efforts. So within this 2-year study, this is a 2-year, 24-month study that we launched at the end of 2023. What we want to do as a first order of business is, in my mind, a little mini study within a larger study. So we call it the initial assessment, and the initial assessment is really to look at the 7-mile stretch of this particular study area that spans from the orange San Diego County line to the south, and then all the way up to about the northern Dana Point city limits. And what we want to do is look at a milepost by milepost segment to see where there are areas that first we need to monitor, or secondly, there are areas that we may need to address so we can minimize to the best that we can any more surprises like the ones we've had that I talked about earlier. And George from our team is going to do a deeper dive into that in a moment. And the outgrowth of this is, again, to identify areas that we need to monitor and also potentially take further actions while we're taking the time to kind of look through other solutions over the 2-year period. We don't want to wait around for 2 years to fix some of the major issues that potentially could come out of this effort. So with that, I'll hand it over to Rob to go over the study schedule and milestone.
Thanks, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. So what you see here for the next slide is we're going to present you with an overall schedule of milestones for the next 2 years to conduct this complete study. So as Dan mentioned, we're going to start with an initial assessment to identify mitigation or monitoring and reinforcement areas that we're going to try to implement, at least continue to advance, so we can protect this railroad while we're doing the rest of the study. And so we've already initiated that work, and the completion of that study is going to be at the end of this month. Then the next primary step is really going to be for us to conduct listening sessions. And this is going to be our first listening session today with this group, with the PDT, but we're going to be conducting listening sessions to engage with a wide range of stakeholders and unique, diverse backgrounds and needs. So we're going to be listening to everyone before we put pen to paper for anything. And so we're looking to obtain feedback from these stakeholders and interest groups through the winter of this year. And so once we put together, conduct these listening sessions, we're going to put together a purpose and need based on what we hear from everyone. And so we're going to be coming back to this group in spring of 24 to present what we found and how we developed the purpose and need. Once we do that, we're going to initiate and dive right into concept development. And so we're going to develop concepts for a broad range of locations and identify potential solutions for those locations. And then we're going to come back to stakeholders and interest groups in fall of 24 with those concepts. We're going to get feedback at that point, and then we're going to develop refinements of those concepts by spring of 25, and we're going to get feedback at that point in spring of 25. And so based on those concepts, the refined concepts, we're going to put together a draft feasibility study report for the entire corridor that considers short and midterm solutions. And that feasibility study report will be conducted spring of 25 to summer of 25. And we're going to come back to this group and the public, and we're going to obtain further feedback. And then lastly, we're going to complete the feasibility study report fall of 25. So that'll put us at about a 2-year mark to complete that work by the end of the year. So next, we're going to move into presenting what our current findings are from the initial assessment.
All right, so our initial assessment was conducted to address the owner and the operators of the railroad right-of-way and the concerns that have been coming about for the last couple of years regarding imminent track issues affecting the track. So the main focus of the initial assessment is to really look at the areas that are affecting railroad operations, namely track infrastructure, and maintaining that railroad operations for both freight and passenger service. We've identified some area of concern through our visual observations. So we've been out on site, we've walked the entire 7-mile stretch with our team. And based on the visual observations to date, we've divided those areas of concern into 2 categories. One is the potential monitoring areas and potential reinforcement areas. The reinforcement areas are those areas where you are maybe 1 storm away from track closure and rail operations being affected, whereas the monitoring areas might be a 2nd storm away or further, but still wanting to make sure that we're keeping a close eye there so that way it doesn't get out ahead of us. And then lastly, we'll talk about some of the next steps that we want to take that are critical as part of the initial assessment to make sure that everybody understands their roles and responsibilities. So I'll start off by summarizing our monitoring areas. So we've identified 7 areas that need monitoring on either a quarterly, semi-annually, or maybe a post-event basis. So post-event meaning a post-storm or a post-earthquake basis. And I'll take you through each one of these 7. So 6 out of these 7 have to deal with monitoring on the coastal side. 1 of them deals with monitoring of the coastal bluffs side. You see here on the map the 7 areas, how they are located across the entire 7-mile stretch. So starting off with the first 2 areas up in the Dana Point area, monitoring area number 1 and number 2, monitoring the beach erosion that's happening here. So we want to make sure that we keep a close eye on what's happening here post-storm events. And these 2 areas will be either on a post-storm, semi-annual, or on a quarterly basis. We want to be able to keep track of that data to see how the coastal and the beach there is changing. Monitoring areas 3, 4, and 5 are also dealing here with the beach side, as well as with the land side at the Mariposa pedestrian bridge. Again, the beaches there and how they are eroding, we would like to. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So right now. Okay.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. The question is, what do you mean by monitoring? Are you looking at qualitative statistics or quantitative statistics? Other mechanisms for monitoring these areas?
Yeah, so at this time in the initial assessment, we haven't gone to that point to define exactly the degree of the monitoring. We have just defined the frequency at a very high level. There will be subsequent studies that will need to be performed at each individual site before a complete recommendation can be made.
Monitoring is simply visual at this point?
At this time, again, we're just recommending monitoring, but a monitoring plan will have to be developed. I can't tell you if that's just going to be visual or other.
Yeah, oftentimes it'll be monitoring from a visual perspective, but also we'll do like LiDAR scans and we'll compare how things are progressing after an event or something along those lines, as we have in Cypress Shores. But also we will, like at Cypress Shores, we installed inclinometers, right? So if we see a potential for slope movement, that could be one option of type of monitoring that we may consider. So right now we've identified that the need. And so step 2 is for us to take those areas and look further into them to identify what is the right type of monitoring or right type of solution to mitigate that need.
Okay, so just to clarify, on slide 16, you have your initial assessment, and then you note the final report is January 2024. So we are currently in January 2024, just trying to understand how you've identified these areas. Are you simply just breaking the 7 miles down into 1-mile segments, roughly?
So the areas are actually in the summary table. You could see the mileposts. So it's either a milepost limit. There's a stretch, for example, milepost 200.8 to 201. So there's a 0.2 of a mile stretch there that we've identified. Sometimes it's something that's pretty localized, like for example, the Mariposa pedestrian bridge. So that's how we've identified for now. And everything up to date has been just based on visual observation of walking the 7-mile stretch.
Yeah, and if I may, what happens after this report will be done by the end of this month. And so the purpose of this initial report is to identify those areas and potential solutions, whether it's monitoring or a particular solution. After that, the intent is for then to move from planning also then to engineering. That's my understanding. And maybe Dan, you can speak to that. What is that?
Yes, thank you, Rob. So just to clarify, as I was mentioning earlier, the purpose of this is a preliminary first look at all of the sites, the 7-mile stretch, so that we can offshoot these areas into our engineering and potentially look at actual solutions. Or conversely, they may do additional analyses and determine nothing needs to be done. We don't know at this point. We don't want to jump the gun. And then to your question about, what does the monitoring entail? That's going to be part of the next step. So the idea was, this is a 24-month study. We don't want to take 24 months and in the meantime hope and pray that there aren't going to be any major storm events. And in the meantime, there are some critical areas that we need to be at a minimum monitoring or potentially do something about it by way of reinforcement. And so the idea is to basically offshoot these, if you will, 7+4 areas so that we can look at them, do a deeper dive. In the meantime, this particular team is going to look at the shorter term and the midterm issues. So that's really why I called it a mini study within the larger study. So hopefully that makes sense.
Just a question on that. So if you're considering shoreline monitoring, I just wanted to offer that there's a couple different programs already in existence in this area. County, we also have a shoreline monitoring camera at both Poche and Capistrano Beach, as well as the transect monitoring that the city of San Clemente is doing, and UCI's drone monitoring program. So maybe first step would just be to kind of coalesce all the data. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why we're bringing this up with this group today as a first step to see, okay, is there anything else we're missing? And that's great that you're giving us that input and feedback. So that's definitely very, very valuable information as we do a deeper dive.
All right, so we spoke about areas 3, 4, and 5, and then the last areas further down, south, areas 6 and 7 at the Calafia State Beach, and also the remainder of the Cypress Shore area that was not reinforced over the last 2 years. And so with that, that leads us then to the areas that are potential for reinforcement. We've identified 4 of those areas, and we'll show you pictures here of those areas as well. But one thing that we just wanted to note here on these particular areas and the reinforcement that is a potential that is being proposed is that, OCTA is also participating in a broader conversation about beach sand replenishment, things that'll be outside of maybe the initial assessment potential solutions versus the midterm or the short-term solutions that are part of the broader study. So we understand that all of that is going on, and we just wanted to make sure that the PDT was also aware that we're keeping that in mind, but because of the duration of years of how quickly we need to jump on some of these potentially, that it's not necessarily going to be feasible to blend this in with a beach sand replenishment program or other broader solutions. So here's area of potential reinforcement number 1. This is up at milepost 203.85 to 203.9. What we have in this area is rock that has been placed over time that is eroding away and being dragged into the ocean, so to speak. And so that very light gray rock that you see, we're saying here that this is a candidate area for potentially adding additional and placing riprap there as well, just to continue supporting the critical track infrastructure during this time. Same thing here with potential reinforcement area number 2. You see there's basically almost no beach in this area, similar type of possible solution here. And we're very close to potential area reinforcement area number 3. at the Mariposa pedestrian bridge. And we understand, over the recent last few months, and just as recently as probably the last week now, with the movement that has been occurring and that has reengaged. And so in this particular area, there's a potential solution for a catchment wall, with trying to figure out how to maintain that pedestrian trail in there as well, which is very important for the community. But this will also need to be studied more in depth as we move forward. And then the last area down in the Cypress Shores area, just north of where we have reinforced it over the last two years. You could see a picture here of one of our team members and the erosion that's out there right now north of the existing Cypress Shore. And this is a potential solution where you add in something of a more engineered riprap solution. So some of the next steps, we mentioned that the initial site assessment is just that. It's an initial assessment, and we need to take the next steps of understanding governance. Where does it go from here? Who takes on those roles and responsibilities amongst the stakeholders? There needs to be a implementation plan that will need to be developed to answer a lot of those more detailed questions about monitoring, what type, and the type of reinforcement solution. Regulatory permitting strategy also has to be really thought through, because this is going to be probably the Achilles heel of any kind of solution that is proposed. And we want to make sure that the solutions are permittable. And ultimately, we want to also make sure that all the stakeholders here understand the procedures for emergency response. And we're even looking at ideas such as stockpiling of materials that might be needed to respond to any event that might be occurring here over the next couple to few years, and as well as maintaining a constant engagement with our stakeholders. So with that, I'll turn it over to our study outreach for Christina.
All right, thank you very much. So now we will talk about the community outreach elements of this study. So this listening session milestone is the first of many in which we will be engaging various stakeholders on all levels, regional, local, federal, as well as just the general public. And these listening sessions will continue now. Today is the first of them, and they will continue through the spring, throughout the month of April. And then we will have draft concept outreach we will be sharing at the next milestone once the listening sessions conclude, as followed by the plan outreach. The PDT has a very important role, of which all of you are a part, and we will be meeting monthly or as needed, yet to be determined, and you will be able to provide input on all the deliverables associated with this study. And then, of course, help us in our community engagement endeavors. So if there's any stakeholders that you interact with regularly and you want them to be a part of this process, we look forward to you sharing with us their information so we can add them to our database. Make sure that they have a seat at the table. So just to revisit the study milestones briefly, I want to make sure that I bring to your attention how we will be obtaining feedback from stakeholders and interest groups throughout this entire study. As you see, the listening sessions on the top left, that is, as I was saying, ongoing through the spring. And then we will also be having feedback from stakeholders and interest groups in the fall for the initial concept development, followed by the refinement of the concepts and draft feasibility study report. So what we're trying to illustrate is there's multiple touch points for stakeholders and the general public to be involved in this study. So now we're going to move into the formal listening session portion of the day. So this is when this is really the meat of what we're doing, and want to hear from all of you your thoughts on how this study should be conducted, any feedback on what we've done thus far. And so I'll be going through a series of questions to kind of spark the dialogue and get us moving. Just as a reminder, these are some of the goals associated with what we're trying to achieve with the listening sessions. Again, if you have stakeholders that you'd like us to engage, we're absolutely welcome. You're welcome to share those with us so we can make sure we reach out to them. And we will be documenting your feedback today and throughout this study. So with that, we reviewed the reinforcement area analysis just a bit ago. And if you need to flip back to those slides in your packet, please feel free to do so. I wanted to ask first and foremost, do you have any comments relative to those specified potential reinforcement areas that you may not have shared already that came to mind as we went through the presentation? Yes, absolutely. So if you are in the room or with us virtually, if you would be so kind as to share your name and introduce yourself briefly so we know who to attribute the comment to, that would be very helpful. And you can raise your hand future if you are joining with us virtually, but I don't see anyone yet. Please.
Hi, Leslie Meyerhoff with the City of San Clemente. With regard to the 4 reinforcement areas, in your report that will be prepared, assessment report, what additional details will you be providing in that report?
So there will be obviously all of the sorry, this is George Roscoe with HDR answering the question. There's going to be all of the backup of the site and visual observations that we did. There is also going to be a written, sections with both the monitoring areas as well as the reinforcement areas. There's also going to be recommendations on a lot of the high-level next steps that you saw that we presented. So all of this just to be verbalized in a more of a technical memo and put into the file for as part of the overall study.
What you're going to move tonight. I know the city will.
All right, so I'm being asked to summarize what was just shared. Is that correct? Okay, so the City of San Clemente, we will have a one-on-one meeting with with you and others with the project team to go through some of those comments. Absolutely. All right, so the next question is, are you aware of any other conditions that should be assessed? Do any come to mind? Do you want to share? Okay.
Hi, thanks. This is Makana Nova with the County of Orange. So you did identify the 2 monitoring locations that are county properties, the first being Capistrano Beach, the south stretch there. We did do a project this past year to add riprap in that very southerly section. There are still sandbag improvements in kind of a middle section of the parking area there. We are working on adding funding to our CIP to replace that those sandbags with riprap. So that is on our minds. We do have a CDP approval in place already for those improvements. It's more a matter of getting the funding in place to proceed with that final piece and phase of the project. So yeah, we are definitely monitoring on our end as well. We have the transect monitoring. I think that occurs right at the property line between Doheny and Capo there. So that's definitely something we want you to be taking a look at. I think San Clemente's erosion control hotspots report is a really great report that's out right now that really gives like a critical areas. So if we can cross compare with those studies with the visual analysis you guys have done, that would be really helpful. As far as this project goes, though, I have some questions, and right now we're studying, and that's great. And I'm kind of, what are we getting to and what are we working toward? If we're identifying these focus areas, I imagine we're focusing on critical areas that might impact the rail line to prioritize these projects. Ultimately, once priorities are identified, are you looking toward helping to fund these projects, or is that like a next step beyond this study portion of the process? How does that work?
Thank you. And it sounds like there should be another targeted one-on-one with OC Parks too, for maybe some of for additional detail on those items.
So this is Dan from OCTA. If I understood the question correctly, I believe you're asking of the larger 2-year study, not necessarily the initial assessment. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So with respect to the larger 2-year, 24-month study effort, what we basically want to do, and kind of going back to the goals and objectives slide earlier, we want to look at solutions, and we don't want to jump the gun. We have just begun this process. We want to look at solutions that will get us through what we call the short term, which could last for a better part of a decade. And again, I don't want to jump the gun and give examples of what they are because we haven't done an actual analysis on what those potential solutions could be. And just to kind of step back a little bit, it's really, in a sense, focusing on the railroad, protecting the railroad in place. So what are things that could be done by way of engineering or other softer solutions outside of the initial assessment that can be done, planned, engineered, and ultimately designed and constructed that would last us, say, a decade? That's more of the short term. Now, in looking at more of the midterm, what are other things that are, what are other potential solutions that could be contemplated that ultimately could be constructed that could last for up to a 30-year period in terms of the design life? So we don't have the answers, and that's part of the reason why we want to have a lot of these listening sessions at the onset, just to kind of have an open slate, listen to what everybody has to say, and then go back and basically look at everything that we have and see what are different challenges, obstacles, limitation, opportunities, and so on and so forth. So, I apologize, I don't have the answers, but really that's the purpose of what we want to achieve out of this. So this 24-month is really more of a planning phase. What is going to come out of this, we hope, are some concepts, and those concepts may last 10 years or they may last 30 years. And then the idea is to basically bring them into further planning and engineering, and then ultimately design them, and then ultimately construct whatever those concepts that came out of this effort.
So thanks, Dan. I'm just wondering how that works because I'm sensing a lot of overlap with the efforts you guys are doing here. Especially with the city of San Clemente, they have their coastal resiliency projects going on right now. They're looking at a lot of those same types of solutions. So if we could all coalesce, and that's where I think you guys having a separate meeting would be really helpful. If these agencies can come together and prioritize one project to all put in, that funding, effort, permitting, et cetera, that's kind of the goal here. That's where I'm wondering, agents, not all OCA jurisdiction.
So just kind of to my introduction earlier, and in thanking, acknowledging the work that we have, collaboration we have had with the city of San Clemente, starting most recently with the emergency efforts at Cypress Shore, at Casa Romantica, we see a path that's similar for this particular effort. And in fact, when the city of San Clemente released their nature-based solution feasibility study back on September 27th, OCTA provided a comment letter, and that comment letter alluded to this particular study. At that time, this particular study had not started yet, and that was something that we contemplated even as far back when the city released their feasibility study, and we do hope that we will have a collaborative effort with the city such that it's not redundant. And that's one of the reasons why in the very beginning we had the history and some of the other agency efforts. We wanted to make sure that we try to encapsulate as much as we can such that we're going to minimize to the best that we can redundant efforts. So we do acknowledge the city's nature-based resiliency study looks at the coastal side, but it did not look at the inland. And so what this particular study is going to do is to look at both sides, take advantage to the best that we can, some of the efforts that have already been underway by the city, and fold that into the larger study.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say that. I think we definitely need to integrate the studies and the efforts that the city is undertaking with OCTAs and vice versa. We welcome the collaboration with your agency. We realize your focus is the railroad. The city's focus is larger than that. It's the entire shoreline, seaward of the railroad. So we are working on a draft design concept report that should be available in February or March. And I think before we get to the point where we are sharing that, we want to talk with you about your reinforcement areas as you're identifying them and find your timeline for implementation of projects. Are these emergency kinds of projects that you anticipate where you're placing additional riprap? Are you looking at other solutions, shore perpendicular solutions, other things than simply the placement of riprap? I think that would be something that we would want to know and would want to coordinate with you on that as soon as possible.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm happy to do so.
Thank you. James Campbell, Low Sand Rail Corridor Agency. As far as the assessments that you guys have done, and actually kind of tying into what the city had said, were the areas that you actually looked at also the inland side of the bluffs that may be outside of railroad right-of-way that have greater and larger impacts and could impact the rail line too? And then also related to that, I know that this historically has a lot of ancient landslides that seem to be reactivating in certain locations. So just wanted to see if that was part of the assessment or how the city's work will be integrated into that.
This is George Roscoe with HDR. So to answer your question, yes, we have looked at the historical landslide areas. We've also been looking at even current landslides or sloughs on the bluffs, coming off that are even outside of our right of way. But through our initial 7-mile stretch visual observation, we focused on those areas that had, at least for the initial assessment right now, that had that imminent threat to track operations. So that's why you don't see those areas coming up here. I do think that maybe in the short or in the midterm, we're going to see those surfacing in those concepts and how do we deal with those. And obviously, because those are outside of our right of way, we will engage our partners at the city.
All right, Hugo, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yeah, I can. You hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, just a quick question. I couldn't tell off of the 7 locations. Are any of Orange County Flood Control District parcels affected? We own and operate a handful of outlets, but I couldn't tell if any of those are within that vicinity or not within the 7 spots.
So this is George Roscoe. I can't answer that question definitively because I don't have a right-of-way map with your right-of-way. But what I would say is monitoring area number 2. I don't know if that is one of your facilities. There's a lot of local drainage that comes and feeds under that railroad bridge there at milepost 202.7. So
Okay, gotcha. Noted. Number 2?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, moving on. If you could advance the slide, Dan. All right, so this slide 35, has a series of questions. I think the first handful, the first one, I believe we've pretty much covered in the last part of the discussion. So I will jump to the second one. Are there any ideas on enhancing railroad stability beyond what's been discussed thus far?
In terms of the solutions that the railroad is looking at, could someone just highlight what those are if they are other than riprap? Are you looking at, bringing in sand via side dump rail car? Are you looking at concepts like Oceanside's looking at with peninsulas or headlands or other features along the shoreline that could slow down sediment movement and maybe filling those areas in with additional sand? I think this is something that the city of San Clemente would be interested in talking with. Again, this is trying to integrate what we're doing for the larger community with your need to protect the railroad.
Thank you, Leslie. So this is from OCTA. The short answer is yes. It's basically we're open to looking at all possible solutions at this point. We want to try to minimize a preconceived notion that it has to be an engineer. That's why earlier I said potentially engineer or even soft solutions. So what you have noted, those are amongst the soft solutions. And in fact, in George's slide earlier, it acknowledged that sand replenishment needs to somehow, some way be part of the equation. But given the complexity, we wanted to try to tease that out so we can basically get underway and make those immediate fixes in terms of the initial assessment. So short answer, yes.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone joining us virtually that would like to address that item? What are your ideas on enhancing railroad stability? And I know Justin also had some comments.
Justin Fornelli. So yes, in general, ideas on enhancing railroad stability, I'm in favor of that. But I think the big thing that I would be concerned about is the construct, maintain, operate, do that. Also be thoughtful about to required permitting or for resource agencies that the railroad needs to operate to be able to maintain our track and maintain our right of way effectively. And so I think that needs to be considered as well with any of these longer term fixes that we're not putting ourselves in a corner where the railroad is not able to continue the maintenance way operations.
Thank you. I see in the chat that David said that audio is not working. It's cutting out. Is it when I speak or what is it when Justin just spoke? Just for our reference, that would be helpful for you to share. Justin. Okay, so that mic is still having troubles. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, we got some tips. All right, moving on. How would you enhance communication on passenger and freight service disruptions? Do you have any thoughts about that we could be collaborating with our partners?
In general, anything, if we know we're going to be disrupting service earlier, communication is always better. Allowing people to make alternative plans for travel is key. I think as an example, from December 26th through the 29th, we shut down all passenger service on the Metrolink system for a major project. We had several months of outreach, and I think it was fairly well received from most of our regular riders and customers. And I think it was, again, that early and often communication was key.
Very good. Thank you. Does anyone virtually Feel free to just raise your hand and we will get to you if you have anything to contribute. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question. What do you see as your agency's role in this process? Any additional thoughts beyond what we've shared already? Okay, I knew someone was going to say something. Thank you.
Hi, Makana here from OC Parks again. I just want to say, we're happy to partner with OCTA, working towards solutions. Hopefully, we're all moving in the same direction, get everyone up to speed on the same track. That's my best train pun so far. So, but we love the interest in working toward a common goal for coastal resiliency along this stretch. It is very impacted and we have a lot of work ahead of us. So just as a partner, I think the cities do have a lot of thoughts in mind already. So if you guys are willing to jump in and help partner on those things, that's what I envision right now. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right. Another comment for us to discuss. Are you familiar with any topical experts that might be of use to this group as we go through this process that we should consider consulting and working with them in any specialties such as coastal erosion, liquefaction, etc.? If you know of anyone, please share their information with us. We'd love to reach out to them.
Should just leave the mic here. It's Makana again with County of Orange. I just want to make sure, I think Susan already mentioned, like UC Irvine has the drone and satellite monitoring. I think they would be a really great partner to understand how sand movement is occurring and how it's impacting those areas. I did happen to speak to them in another meeting this morning. They mentioned how they have been doing the satellite monitoring, are able to see those critical points along the rail line even and ahead of when acted. So that would be a great partner to look at the track more closely.
Excellent, thank you. And I see that Hugo added something in the chat. And then if we could bring the mic to James, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. James Campbell again, Low Sand Rail Corridor Agency. And this kind of covers a couple questions here also, but as far as, reaching out to even some of the other railroads across the country, because this isn't a uniquely Orange County issue. Just along the Low Sand Rail Corridor for our agency alone, there's 4 counties that have coastal erosion issues similar to San Clemente. They're all having to address it. So the more you can reach out to some of the other railroads that are dealing with this to get ideas, even outside of California, well, they may not have all of the resource agencies they have to deal with, but they have at least possible engineering solutions and ways to actually address it going forward might help there. So I think that's one thing also that the Low Sand Agency can bring is kind of a corridor-wide engagement with the multiple stakeholders over the 6-county region here too.
Thank you, James.
Hopefully I'm not disconnecting anything. So Caltrans is the Department of Transportation. So we're obviously really vested in making sure mobility is not impact. In this similar vein to James, we have division of study.
Can you bring the mic up? There you go.
All right. So in terms of case studies from other parts of the state, we'd be happy to connect to your resources. California.
Thank you for that. All right. Any other thoughts before we move on? All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so just to revisit the schedule milestones, does anyone have any feedback for us regarding how these milestones have been drafted and the various timeframes that we have here listed? Any feedback regarding that? Seems reasonable. Okay, great. And then should there be any others that that come to mind that we should be including in PDT that perhaps you didn't see on the invite? We'd be happy to expand this group with other representatives from your particular organizations or other organizations that we may not have listed. State parks. Okay. Any others? Anyone in the chat or virtual? I don't see anyone. Okay, well, oh, yes, Justin.
I guess in regards to the initial assessment and some of this initial work, is there any need to secure funding or pursue funding and start those type of discussions and outreach to actually get this work done to make sure that the railroad is protected?
This is Dan from OCTA. Thank you, Justin, for that question. To answer your question regarding funding for subsequent phases, we're constantly seeking funding opportunities, whether it's the state or federal level. But I would say that for this particular effort, OCTA did receive TIRCP funding for which we can use for subsequent phases, whether it's the environmental or design phase. So we are constantly seeking funding opportunities for subsequent phases. We don't want to the study and then have to put it on pause for 6-9 months while we're waiting for seeking funding for the next phase. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you very much. All right, and the next slide, Dan, can you move to the next slide? Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. There was a suggestion online, Coastal Commission. Absolutely. Absolutely. We will definitely include them. I know that they are included on other stakeholder groups that we have right now that we'll be conducting listening sessions with, but we can certainly take that into consideration. All right. So public engagement in general, we're working on gathering feedback and key themes. And if you have any key themes from your constituents that we should keep in mind, we'd love to hear those if you're willing to share them with us today. As far as overarching concerns that your constituents may have or that they'd like to share. And feel free to put in the chat any of your thoughts as well. Okay, do you have any comments or questions on our approach thus far to public engagement? Is there anything else that you would suggest? We will be having listening sessions and other milestones with the general public, and we'll be offering those in person and also virtually, so people can participate in however they wish, at least more than once. Yes, I can bring it to you. Oh, okay.
Thanks, it's Makana again with the County of Orange. Just wanted to, on the public engagement and outreach aspect, I think, both cities, San Clemente and County of Orange along the way have been working with some very vocal groups based in San Clemente, but interested in sand replenishment and kind of regional sand nourishment program. So it's something we've had our eye on at the county, looking at getting beneficial reuse and making use of those opportunities more through our flood control systems, making use potentially of the rail system, a stockpile site in South Orange County so that we can have the time to permit and get the permits in place that we need to benefit in South County beaches. So grand dreams, grand thoughts there, but definitely something we're looking to partner with the agencies on that we've been speaking with. I know Dan Fu over here at OCTA has kind of been taking the lead on some of those concepts, but we really are interested in developing those further. I think we have common goals there, and so just the community is very interested in those pursuits as well along the way.
I would just add that the city of San Clemente would be happy to host a workshop or a public meeting, either with the city council at one of their regular meetings that's upcoming, or as part of a coastal advisory committee meeting in the future. We actually have a meeting tonight at 4 o'clock. Our next meeting will be in March. So we'd be happy to put you on the agenda if that's something of interest to you to detail this project, the scope, the schedule to the greater community. I think that would be a great way to get the information out and get some feedback from the many community groups we have in San Clemente that are interested in this project.
Great, thank you so much. Coastal Advisory Committee. And we're also, as I mentioned earlier, building our database, and we are trying to add as many local stakeholders as possible to that list. So if you have anyone or any list that you'd like to share with us, we'd be happy to include them in that. And we also are making sure that we have a stay connected link on our page, on our website, which I will be sharing that website in a moment. And anyone can go to the website, enter in their contact information, and they will receive all subsequent study notification. In the chat, I'm looking to see if there's anything else. Not sure how you will conduct your public meetings, but dividing and conquering in the stations, absolutely, we will take that into consideration. Thank you so much. And if you have any mechanism within your jurisdiction to share notification and let interested stakeholders know about the work and what we're doing and any other opportunities for them to participate, we will certainly be looking to you to help us spread the word. And we'll be sharing information with you in order for you to post on any websites that you may have, or blogs, or other mechanisms, social media and the like, that you could be able to help us spread the word. All right, so next steps, we mentioned that we're continuing this listening session approach. Today is our very first listening session / PDT, and these will continue. We don't have dates yet for any of the subsequent listening sessions, but we're working on scheduling those, as I shared, now through the end of April. And some of those groups that we are engaging are listed here, as well as a brief description of what we have in mind for those groups. I won't go through each of them one by one, but as you can see here, we're trying very hard to cast a wide net and leave no stone unturned in regards to engaging the community for this effort. All of these listening sessions are important because what we hear at these listening sessions will be helping us shape and refine our purpose and need for this study. And then, of course, develop our evaluation criteria, and all the input will be threaded throughout the study documentation as we move forward. And I mentioned our project website. As you move on to the next slide, oh, there we go. Contact information for Dan Fu and myself is listed here, including our project website. I encourage you to check out this website as the study moves forward. Currently, we have the project fact sheet that you received a copy of in the back of the room and in the packet for today. It is on the website right now, as well as our high-level schedule. And we will be putting a frequently asked questions on the project website in the near term, and all the materials we have associated with this study will be loaded in a timely manner on that website as well. So that concludes our listening session portion, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions before we leave today. Any other questions for Dan, myself, or the rest of the team? Yes.
Sorry to come in at the last minute, but just one question on the overall study. Like, how much do you think you'll focus on, I'm not going to say the dirty word managed retreat, but coastal strategic realignment? Is that one of the options? No, this is really focused on coastal resiliency. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, any other comments? Is there anything in the chat to draw my, oh, yes, okay, I'm heading over. All righty, Hugo, let's see, think of the repair more holistically and take advantage of repairs beyond affected right-of-way since it affects both inland and seaward assets that are outside of the right-of-way or railroad. In other words, consider bigger repairs that doesn't just create a moat around the tracks and maybe get into some co-ops with affected stakeholders. All right. Any other comments in the chat for us? Hugo, do you want to unmute and share anything else?
Okay. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your participation today. All right. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your day.